Okay,
So
let's move on to more censorship related to, and the Twitter files. Has been new Twitter files information.
there was a new drop, and it's one of the most interesting drops so far. We'll call it a supplemental drop because it's really going into a deep dive on an organization that we know very well, Mike, and Vanessa also knows too. But let's look at this latest Twitter files drop here. And this features this organization, the Atlantic Council, very important organization, and all of their various offshoots like the DFR labs and so forth. So how did this whole disinformation network come together? Well, all is revealed from the emails from Twitter's servers. And in this case, we're going to look at the work here of Andrew Lowenthal. Now, I like his work because he comes from arguably the other side. He said he used to be with some of these organizations and left, and he's been very open about his past affiliations. And he feels like he's, by exposing them now, he's doing the public a great deal of service. But not only that, he understands these organizations very well. So he's basically one of the Twitter files journalists here. He also understands power, and this was what I like about his drops, is he really gets how all the power converges here. So this is the latest here. Let's take a closer look here. He's calling it the no kidding decision makers, the anti-disinformation field, how it all got organized back when all these forces came together. 2018, 2017, very key period. Mm-hmm. You also have this timeline on UK Columns website as well. So some of this will be very familiar to you. Let's take a closer look here. Just pointing out some of the familiar faces. Jim Clapper, former head of U.S. intelligence, and of course, Carl Bildt, a perennial Bilderberg attendee, former prime minister of Sweden here, just to name a few. So these are, again, spooks involved at the highest level. You got the heads of major PR firms as well. Facebook's represented, Microsoft, of course. It almost looks like, Mike, a breakout meeting for Bilderberg, if you really want to break down the guest list here. So they had this week these double summit. One was in Latvia, the other in Costa Rica here, 360 OS Summit. Okay, this is the Atlantic Council, and we'll look at this. So, you can see the types of people, Boris Johnson, Mike Pompeo, who the deep state will thrust as the Republican vice presidential candidate. He is the next Dick Cheney, representing the defense establishment here, Mike Pence, George Bush Jr., of course. These are the types of people that have been featured in the past with the Atlantic Council and DFR Lab. So this is really a privatized arm of the Central Intelligence Agency and MI6. Okay, so let's look at this double event here. And so they have their own situation room. Twitter also gives to these events as well previously under the previous regime. So big tech is part of the funding for Atlantic Council, along with the defense industry, along with finance and the energy sector, all of the things that U.S. Overseas imperialism, those interests they seek to protect and create markets for, those are the funders of the Atlantic Council and these types of events. Isn't that interesting? So let's take a look at this. They're also partnering DFR Labs with the Virology Project. They ran a lot of the censorship, as we showed previously, regarding COVID and vaccines. That's really important. Also, in addition to that, well, let's take a look at this. So these are the items which they were marked to be censored. Anything questioning COVID cases or COVID deaths, the lethality of the virus, we're talking early on in 2020, marked for removal, and IFR, spread, etc. Anything that provided anything different than the mainstream or the government narrative. Alternative remedies, treatments, that was marked for removal. Questioning the efficacy of masks, marked for removal. Vaccine efficacy and safety, marked for removal. Side effects of vaccines, deaths, and any post that creates, quote, vaccine hesitancy, immediately marked for either removal or what they called limited distribution, i.e. shadow banning. Right. So the DFR Labs, Atlantic Council, not just in the war conversation, they're also working on COVID and vaccines as well. And so this was the hub. This is the Global Engagement Center, which they are also partnering with. This is the State Department funded hub where all of the three-letter agencies could go and gain access to Facebook, Google, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn. Okay, so this is the main organizing hub that allows the deep state access into the censorship machine. We're calling this the censorship industrial complex here. Back to Andrew's Twitter files drops, and we'll look at this, the DFR Labs and the Global Engagement Center and Hamilton 68. So they're organizing these networks behind the scenes from 2018. And so sharing information, sharing blacklists, and Hamilton 68, just to remind people, I'll show you in a second here, but Clint Watts and the German Marshall Fund, again, State Department, Alliance to Secure Democracy. So anything that's Russian-related, Russian disinformation, a threat to democracy, this was all funded. And then they're coordinating with the Atlantic Council, the DFR Labs, all of those agencies we just showed you as well. And so Hamilton 68, just to remind people, that was, this is Matt Taibbi's drop here. That was my Twitter account marked for removal. Now, Twitter didn't remove my account, it turns out, because of Clint Watts and Hamilton 68, but I don't know that this same list wasn't acted on with Google, YouTube, and Facebook, which I can hardly post on for years now. So interesting. But there's a lot of other people on there that turned out to actually be real people and not Russian bots. So there we are. So that's at 21Wired. Thank you, Elon Musk. We're back on the platform. And so here's the Costa Rican event, Mike. It's called RightsCon. See how they're framing this as a global meeting to secure the rights of people online, okay? So RightsCon, this is DFR Labs here. These are the sponsors. Look at the people involved with this. You've got DFR Labs, you've got Mozilla Foundation, you've got all the major cell phone carriers as well, the government in Sweden, Microsoft, Open Society Foundation. It's a who's who. Okay, so it seems like a good cause, right? And the Internet Society, ICANN as well for the URLs. So RightsCon, let's take a look at RightsCon. And you can see an internet free and secure. Sounds good. The speakers are very secure. You can see one of them is still wearing his mask this week. But let's look at what their actual program is here. An internet free and secure initiative. Recommendations for human rights-based approach to cybersecurity. This is their main mission. And if you look on this website, you'll see all of their basically mission statement. I think it's 10 steps to secure people's rights online. So here's how they're framing it. Cybersecurity capacity building has an important role in enhancing and securing of persons both online and offline. Such efforts should promote, quote, human rights, respecting approaches to cybersecurity. How do you read through this, Mike?
So, well, it's the usual narrative. We're going to come onto this with respect to the EU, of course, because in order to shut down freedom of speech, we've got to support freedom of speech. This is the kind of language that they use. In order to enhance the security of people, we've got to basically lock everything up so that people can't express themselves properly and so on. But they're using cybersecurity and they're using other buzzwords like this in order to justify or to create the idea of some kind of threat that they have to act against.
And offline offline, so that's online harms.
Yes.
So again, it's bringing that language together here.
Yeah.
It all sounds wonderful and it's very well funded, okay? So this is the way that they're approaching this through the Atlantic Council. Now, I want to point to something that a lot of people might not be aware of, okay? This is Aaron Berman. He is the head of Facebook's Trust and Safety, okay? And so we found this out in the previous Twitter files drop here. And so he's talking about his oversight board here with other tech companies. They have a board, they have their sort of Zoom meetings, which we'll show you one of those in a minute. So Aaron Berman, interesting character, right, Mike? He wants to prevent imminent physical harm from COVID misinformation, things like this. Let's take a look at here. To all my trust and safety friends at Twitter. So they're coordinating, either current and former. I hope that you know your work has made a difference. Thank you for everything you've done, whatever the future holds, says Aaron Berman, head of Facebook's Trust and Safety, community safety guidelines and whatnot, okay? Well, here he is here. Turns out he's former CIA. So he's not just any former CIA here, followed by Yoa Roth. So they're all working together here. Going to his LinkedIn profile, he actually was the CIA agent who would brief the president for his morning briefings, who moved straight from the Central Intelligence Agency, which arguably is a good job, isn't it? It's got a good pension. Not the sort of thing that you'd walk away from for a big tech job.
I would say once an
necessarily.
intelligence officer, always an intelligence officer.
It moves straight into censorship community guidelines
Yes.
at Facebook. Can you believe it?
Yes.
Alongside Nick Clegg and Ben Nemo.
Yeah.
Ben Nemo from the Atlantic Council. Okay, so let's establish that. Now let's look at their Zoom call here. This is with Aaron Berman and also from people from Twitter and I think from another tech company. And here they're talking about how to censor on COVID and shadow banning and why it's a great thing. Go ahead and roll this.
For some examples, we add labels on posts about COVID-19 and vaccines to show additional information from the WHO. When we do remove misinformation from the platform, which I'll talk about in a second, we built a tool so that we notify users who saw that misinformation before we removed it so that they have access to the authoritative information that corrects it. So that's in a large bucket our part of our inform work here. On remove for COVID-19, we do have a policy to remove harmful misinformation related to this topic. Specifically, we remove content that has been debunked as false and leading to physical harm by public health experts related to the pandemic. So these are things like fake preventative measures, claims the virus doesn't exist, or this also includes a variety of claims about vaccines. The idea here is to remove misinformation that could lead to imminent physical harm by somebody maybe not receiving appropriate treatment or exposing themselves to the disease. So on vaccines specifically, in December last year, we started removing false claims about the vaccine, again, that fall within this category. And we've expanded the list of claims we remove about vaccines in general earlier this year in consultation with health experts. And we're continuing to make updates to these policies as trends emerge, including just this week, in fact. And we also remove pages, groups, and Instagram accounts that repeatedly violate these policies to get at those entities that might repeatedly spread this content. And then finally, the third part of the strategy, addressing borderline content, which could lead to vaccine hesitancy, which falls into the reduce area. So we do reduce the distribution of certain content about vaccines that doesn't otherwise violate our policies. And our approach here is really grounded in guidance that we've gotten from health experts that who've emphasized the idea that overcoming vaccine hesitancy really depends on people being able to ask legitimate questions about safety and efficacy and get those questions answered by trusted sources. But at the same time, we also realize that certain of this content could lead to hesitancy. So we reduce its distribution.
So there's a CIA top guy reducing your distribution of your tweets and posts on Facebook, talking with the other big tech companies who are basically doing the same, right?
Yes.
He's reducing distribution, shadow banning. So what's the saying that they have? You have the right to speak, but you don't have the right to be heard.
That's right. Yeah.
Or something.
That's absolutely right. That's the principle. Yes.
Freedom
of speech, but no right to be heard.
No, yeah, freedom of speech, but not freedom of reach. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not a conspiracy theory, of course. It's there. You have it from the horse's mouth. Okay. So that's to me, this is all very revealing. I know we're going back in time a little bit, but it's important that we establish the facts of history of what happened and people to understand how this whole network is constructed. Government absolutely actively involved. Now, we know about all this stuff on the U.S. side now. What's it like on the British side?
It's much the same. I mean, the key point here, Patrick, is Twitter under Musk is getting absolutely hammered by everybody, even today. And so we've got to understand the context of this to understand why they're so concerned about Twitter's approach to how he's running the organization. So anyway, of course, one of the people that is...
can I just add one thing?
Yes, go ahead.
While they've been spending all of this time censoring political speech and your evil COVID and vaccine hesitancy speech online, it turns out that Instagram has looked the other way with a huge pedophile network running openly on Instagram during this whole period. This has just broken the last 24 hours, this story. Okay, we haven't covered it. I'm sure you might. I hope you cover it on Monday.
Yep.
So they put all of their resources into censoring your political speech and your vaccine hesitancy, but they let organized criminal gangs run amok on Instagram openly during this whole time. Okay, where are their priorities when it comes to trust and safety? This is a good question.
Very good question.